Games are complicated. There's so much that goes into making a game. You need art, programming, music, probably more. It's a miracle games exist in the state that they do now. But to play the complications that are games, you need to use the complications that are buttons. Buttons do basically everything in games. You wanna jump? That's a button. You wanna attack? That's another button. You wanna throw your controller at the screen? Okay, maybe that's like half a button. Regardless, with how many things buttons pilot, what would happen if you removed all of them but one? Okay, yeah, that's expected. One-button games sound like a silly idea. How do you make an entire game function with just one button? It's a question of simplicity. Well, there are many different types of them. The line between what is and isn't a one-button game blurs really quickly. So let's go through their different types and discover what makes one-button games so great. I still haven't beaten it. The best way to make a one-button game is to make a simple game. One that doesn't need all the complications of multiple buttons. And the simplest games to make aren't games at all. They're mini-games. Since mini-games are made to be sweet and simple, they use the least amount of buttons possible. There are many mini-games that only use one button. Duels, fishing, picking your boogers. But the gameplay of those mini-games are usually one of 4 different categories. Pressing the button as fast as possible, pressing the button as much as possible, pressing the button when the time is right, and knowing when to press and release the button. Basically every one-button minigame follows one of these 4 categories. Button mashing to fill a balloon? Press as much as possible. Having to unsheath your sword before your opponent? Pressing as fast as possible. Picking your boogers? Press when the time is right. Trying to eat eggs without eating bombs? Knowing when to press and release. They're simple ideas, but each minigame adds different twists and variations to the formula. Crane game from Kirby's Adventure is timing based. You need to release A when the crane is above one of the Kirby plushies. The trick is that there are 2 Kirbys and 2 chances to get all of them. Will you opt for just getting the first one? Will you opt for starting with the second one in case you fail the first time? Will you go for the first one because you're confident that you'll get the second one? Will you fail to get both and realize you suck ass at everything? It spices up the minigame and gives it an aspect of strategy. Slot Cinch from Mario Party 3 has many aspects to it. You have to pair up slots, except you're doing it with a teammate, meaning you control one slot while your teammate controls the other. On top of that, not every slot has the same value. You want to shoot for the slots that give you the most points while avoiding the slot that takes away points, all while making sure your slots actually match. The WarioWare games have their gimmicks not in the micro games, but in the fact that they run back to back and without breaks. You need to figure out what to do, how to do it, and then do it well in the 2 seconds the micro game gives you before you're sent into another one. It adds a very strong element of reflexes and just general chaos. WarioWare also happens to have an interesting case of one-button minigames, and this is where we reach our first roadblock. Is the DS touchscreen a button? See, if the point of one-button games is to do away with the complexity of multiple buttons, doesn't that leave the idea of a 0-button game in the air? That's when the confusing case of touchscreens come in. By the time of the DS, and especially the time of smartphones, games were starting to head into another territory. Games needed to be as simpler as ever to appeal to as many possible markets. And what's more simpler than just touching a screen? It's not like the DS did away with buttons, but when gaming started moving towards the smartphones, that's when something had to change. I'm not gonna connect my GameCube to play Flying Gorilla. With the mobile games being similar to mini-games in their simplicity and ease of access, a no-button style for them fits perfectly. But it does offer the question of, are these actually 0-button games? Or are they one-button games? A touchscreen is a button, right? Do they have more than one button? Sure, you have tapping, but you also have dragging, swiping, zooming in and out. What's the verdict on those? Is there a sort of one-button guidebook I can buy somewhere? Book of Unemployment. Something like Flappy Bird is 100% a one-button game. All you do is tap, there's nothing else. But what about Tomb of the Mask? Would swiping be a different button from tapping? What about the location of your tap? Does that matter? Hell, what about tilting the phone or shaking it? If it's a mobile game being ported to consoles, and the console version version uses different buttons, what's the ruling there? You can apply this exact same ruling to mouses too. Is Cookie Clicker a one-button game? All you do is use left click and click the cookie, just forget that you need to, move the mouse. Is any PC game ever a one-button game as long as it only uses left click? It gets really difficult to quantify really fast, which is why I like to look at the spirit of a game over its technicality. If it feels like a one-button game, that matters a lot more. The simplicity and design elements of a one-button game are what makes it so special, not just the fact that it only uses one button or input. That's why something like the Google Chrome dinosaur game fits a one-button convention a lot more than other mobile games. They're both tapping, but the spirit of a one-button game resides in the former. If we want to talk about the feel of a one-button game, we gotta talk about the controller that is literally just one button. The Pokeball Plus is a controller styled around a Pokeball, where the analog stick and the A button are fused into the Pokeball center button. There's a bumper on the top of the Pokeball for menus, and that's it. You can play the entirety of the 2 games that support it using just the Pokeball. The Pokemon Let's Go games have a unique formula that allows you to catch Pokemon by just throwing the ball. It's like you're really catching the puddle of sludge. The Let's Go games aren't actually one-button games. You still need to traverse menus, move around, press different buttons when you need to. But it's incredible that such a game can be shaved down from this to this. It's not like Pokemon games are all that complex, but still, it's impressive to turn this into a one-button game, or at the very least, using a one-button controller. In my opinion, the spirit of a one-button game resides most in a series, the Rhythm Heaven series. Rhythm Heaven is a collection of rhythm minigames set around hitting the button at the tempo of the music. Okay, look, maybe not every rhythm minigame uses just one button. Max is maybe like, 3. But the reason I talk about Rhythm Heaven is because, again, the design and creativity of a one-button game matters more over the actual input. And this game is a full-length game based on mostly hitting just one button. They get really creative incorporating the least amount of buttons possible into a rhythm game and making sure it's still fun. And they do a great job preparing you and making sure perfecting the levels are engaging. Seriously, with how long the last remixes go, it's difficult. While Rhythm Heaven carries the spirit of one-button games best, I think that's largely in part due to rhythm games carrying the spirit best in general. Geometry Dash is probably the best example of this. So much is done with the idea of just one button jumping you. There's nothing else, literally no other input needed. In terms of just practicality, Geometry Dash is probably the best one-button game, or at least the best example of one. But my favorite's probably Rhythm Doctor. It's all based on hitting spacebar during the 7th beat of the song, using a doctor theming with the heartbeat being the, beat. But then songs start to skip beats, use irregular time signatures, move your heartbeat around, and it ends up being an incredibly fun experience. I think the creativity of all these games comes from their natural simplicity. The more buttons and systems you have in a game, the less depth they all need to share. Copping out on the creativity of one section doesn't matter as much considering you have many other things to do. But when you're limited in those systems, for example, only having one button, that system and its depth needs to be fully fleshed out. You need to use it in different ways, creative ways, but simple doesn't always inherently mean bland or bad. A lot of games are better for their simplicity and a lot of games are worse for their complexity. Geometry Dash doesn't need a skill tree or dodging or dashing because it takes away from the simplicity of the game. The simpler something is, the easier it is to grasp, to know, but it's also more focused. It's in the restraint of being simple that you must find the most creative ways to stay fun and intuitive. And nothing is more simple than a one-button game. So even something as simple as pressing the A button on beat can be magical. One-button games are great. They're the pinnacle of less is more. There's something beautiful about the simplicity of them. In a world of games getting more technologically impressive and full, they stand out by being the opposite. It can be really hard to make something simple and yet work really well. Hell, even harder than something complex would. But in the end, it pays off. Everyone's played a simple game before. Ever heard of rock, paper, scissors? If you've got an example of a one-button game I didn't talk about, leave them in the comments comments. I'm sure I missed out on plenty. There can be mountains of joy to come out of something simple. Multiply that by endless possibilities, and that's what can happen with just one button. You know, I really should have double checked with the Book of Unemployment before I made this video. I gotta make sure I got everything right. Are there any other page? No.